design is content is something that's very close to my heart. I think, in a sense, this is just a development from character, but I'm going to run through some further examples to try and define a little more what I mean here. This is where there's a series of 3 slides that are compulsory for every talk that I give. I squeeze them in somewhere, somehow. My friend Lewis is laughing there because he's seen it before. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen this before. But Raygun, music magazine for the 90s, very linked with the whole grunge music era. And a situation where the art director really was ended up stronger than the editor. And was able to express himself on the pages to points where quite often pages were the polar opposite of the New Yorker in every respect. The point where you often couldn't read pieces. Sometimes pieces would be run off the edge of the page. Sometimes pieces would be run backwards. It was fonts were used that you couldn't read, and it became. I mean, it is a music magazine, but it became a magazine that was actually bought by designers rather than music fans. But there was one particular example that I always like to show, and it's an interview with Brian Ferry, which David Carson, the art director, decided was so boring that he ran it in dingbats. And they ran it in dingbats. It was only relatively recently that I discovered that, have we got it? Yeah, there's the whole piece. I did actually start to translate it, try and work out what it said, but then I got the first paragraph done, but then I realised actually at the back of the magazine, and interestingly there's a conflict here, because if you look at the 2 big dingbats there, the red and green piece, they're actually quite a legitimate piece of magazine design in the sense they are being used as asterisks, if you like. They are a big signifier, because at the back of the whole book, they ran the whole piece, and there you see the little asterisk. So it is, they're using navigational tools as discussed in my first section, but and then they did run the whole piece, and it was boring. Another example of a magazine that had some issues with design, not quite so extreme, but this is interesting just because it does involve the readers en masse. In this case, a group of what you would suppose were very visually literate and people interested in experiment and visual communication at its most extreme. This is a magazine published from Amsterdam which is aimed at architects. Now, I have some friends that are architects, and I know actually that in reality a lot of architects are very, very, very conservative, except in the role of buildings. And this is what happened here. This is another magazine, a bit like Raygun, that magazine designers and art directors really got off on, because it was just so designed. The page was so worked and so built off the content. This is a piece about the building in Barcelona, the cigar building, and they've taken the pattern on the building and applied it to the page, and I remember this is the first issue. I remember buying it and thinking, wow, this is fantastic. It's great, dense design that's built on the content, comes out of, takes stuff from the architecture and presents it in graphics. I love this magazine. Unfortunately, architects hated it.
Really?
Yes, they had to redesign it. There are 2 issues of it. They've redesigned it. It's completely different now, and that's because the readership just didn't get it. Again, it was in danger of being a magazine for our graphic designers who were just looking at it instead of reading it, whereas it's a sister publication to Frame, and then Frame has a very good audience, and I mean, it's still very designed, it's still just like Frame, but it's much less so, it's much less in your face. And in reality it's quite hard to get what architects want out of those images. I mean, it looks, from my point of view, I think it's a lovely experiment in overlaying and creating surface tension. It all works together, and this is what I mean by design being content. The designs, in this case, it's a fantastic piece of editorial design in the sense that, to my mind, it's a great piece. It's got colour, it's got interesting typography, it works with the headline, it all seems to gel. Just that one missing step is that you can't see the pictures, you can't see what the architects would want to be looking at. Whereas another magazine like this, New York, is coming from the other angle altogether. This is a very, very clever, very, very well-made magazine. The reason it is so is because the art director and editor have had a fantastic working relationship. It's a long-standing magazine. It's not as old, nearly as old as the New Yorker, but it's in the same weekly market. It's a listings magazine, and it's a very upmarket New York Manhattan magazine. It's beautifully put together. This is a typical front cover that one of the travelling, one sees a lot of tourist stuff at the airports where one goes to, and there's always somewhere you can almost guarantee there's going to be a version of the I Love New York logo. We have them in London, the I Heart NY and the I Heart LDN, etc., etc. Amsterdam's got some nice stuff in that way at the moment. I haven't had a chance to look around here whether maybe there's not many tourists, I don't know. But so often that classic I Love New York thing gets contorted and perverted and misused. But this is a really lovely adaptation that refers to it without labouring it. It's just it's a lovely cover. I'm going from a tangent. They have pioneered the use of infographics in a sphere where you wouldn't normally get infographics. By infographics, I mean diagrams and technical explanations. And this is the epitome of it. This is, I mean, in another magazine, say Grazia, this would be a gossip page. This would be a series of gossip about people in Manhattan. But they've managed to resolve it into a matrix, a kind of a SWOT analysis, where you've got highbrow and lowbrow, despicable, and I forget the other axis. But and you're placing cultural events and people and news events on those axes, and so you're making very, very bold statements about people without actually having to spell it out. So it's become a regular item in the magazine every week, and it's very popular, and it's being copied by other people. But the point is, it's taking content and moving it beyond just the normal kind of columns of text that are gossiping about so-and-so and this and that. It's giving you information in a diagram that you wouldn't normally get in a diagram. Something they apply across the board with lots of little witty drop-ins, and there's lots of magazines run society pages with lots of cutouts and who was there and who was here. And this is a very elegant version of one of those. It does the same job, but it's an upmarket version of it, because it's just got a sense of logic, and it's not the Grazia bang, bang, bang. Neither is it the New York, all peaceful. It's got elements of both, but they're resolved in a way that's very successful. This is something I thought was beautifully done, and it's just the idea of a tag cloud that one sees on the web, where it's taking speeches by Michelle Obama and just indicating which words figure most in them by showing the size of the word. Another American magazine which similarly combines image, the word, and design to create content above and beyond what you might expect is Wired. It's generally thought of as being a technology magazine, but the actuality is that Wired can almost include anything it wants. It has a very open remit, but the one thing that is consistent across most of the content that it runs is that it's very, very hard to find pictures. It's very, very hard to come up with ideas how to illustrate it, how to illustrate the pieces. They're generally conceptual pieces or big list pieces. In this case, it's 15 people the next president should listen to is the cover story. They do quite a lot of graphic covers, and they do a lot of graphics inside, but they make it sexy. They make it really, really attractive, and that's because they've been designed to the nth degree. It's still based on the content, and earlier I mentioned the idea of nothing being on the page that doesn't have to be there. Well, this is a really, really busy page. It builds on the idea of the approval matrix that I showed you from New York Magazine. But everything is there for a purpose, and it's easily navigatable, it's easily understandable, but it says fun, it says lightheartedness, it's not too serious. Similarly, I'm going to have to speed up a bit, just going to run through some pages here. Just the idea of having a picture of the same guy and putting a line through one of them, it suddenly becomes, there's a point being made there.